Okay, so for the recording, I'm trying to make my view as the presenter a little bit bigger. So those folks who will watch this recording later will have that see me as well as my slides. And I'm sorry for those who are present, because we're mainly presenting online, you're not going to see my slides in the same way. They're not projected, but I'll fill you in on what they're seeing. Okay. Sure. So since the majority of our audience is virtual, so I want to just welcome everybody. My name is Ruthi Hanchett, and I am an adjunct professor with Vanguard University. So I work with the Global Center for Women and Justice, and I get to teach there. So I teach undergraduate students at Vanguard University on the topic of human trafficking. I also get to coach our Live to Free Club. It's a college student club, which Michaela, one of our audience members, is part of that club and a leader with that club. And over the last decade, our students have reached over 10,000 people with messages about human trafficking, mostly youth in that message, to raise awareness and do prevention. But before that, I had a career working with World Vision International. I spent 9 years with them and got to work with students and communities around the world, and really some of the most vulnerable and poor communities in the world. And I especially got to partner with young people to create opportunities for them to raise their voice, and oftentimes bring them even to world leaders, events and opportunities where they could speak about the issues that affected them and their ideas and solutions for the problems they faced, including human trafficking and sexual exploitation. And I'm also a mom. I have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old. So I get to see some of this work in action with my own kids as well. And I also volunteer a lot in my community and my kids' school, engaging in these kind of issues of protecting kids. So my assumption is that many of you who are online, or those who are here in this audience, are here because you do work with young people. You have an interest and a desire to empower and engage young people in this work of ending human trafficking. And especially I want to focus in on prevention. And so that's what we're going to be discussing today, is how do we support young people to do this work? How do we, I'm going to talk about what a peer-to-peer model looks like, how we can enable young people in that work. We're going to talk about what partnerships look like between adults and youth, how we can enable those and support young people. And I want to talk about some of the tips and the lessons that I've learned doing the work I've done with World Vision International, with Vanguard University and Live to Free, and in other organizations. And we've worked with high schoolers and groups to help mobilize them and engage them to fight human trafficking. So I can show my slides are advancing for my folks that are online. We want to start by thinking about, why do we even engage young people in this work? Why do we want to involve children and youth in anti-human trafficking work? And especially when we're talking about prevention. And the simple answer is that young people are vulnerable to exploitation and to human trafficking. We know that there's an estimated 40 million people around the world involved in what we call modern day slavery. That's more than the population of California, where I live, or this country of Canada. So, and of those about 40 million people, the estimate is that 25%, a quarter, are children, minors under the age of 18. So young people are vulnerable, and they are exploited for some of the same reasons that adults are exploited for, both labor trafficking as well as commercial sexual exploitation of children. Many of those may be girls who are forced into unwanted and child marriages. In fact, of that 40 million or so, we estimate 15 million women and girls are in what's considered servile or forced marriages, child marriages, or marriages in which women didn't truly consent. And then even if we look at the kind of the bigger picture of children engaged in labor trafficking and labor exploitation, the latest estimates are that there's about 160 million children involved in child labor around the globe. Many of those, 97 million boys, 63 million girls, and that number has actually been growing since COVID and since the pandemic has affected so many families and communities. So we have a serious problem of children being vulnerable to exploitation and abuse that really affects their long-term development, health, wellness, and safety. So when we think about why do we engage young people and why do we want to involve them in anti-human trafficking efforts, the first is because they're vulnerable, right? Especially if we look at the impact, the consequences of commercial sexual exploitation, of labor trafficking and abuse, and the deprivation that comes along with that that deprivation that children experience, it can have lifelong consequences, deeply rooted consequences. And we know that if kids have a history of child sexual abuse, if they come from marginalized groups, vulnerable groups, if they have absent or dysfunctional family life, if they come out of a community with very low economic opportunities, they're very much at risk. Yet, I have an image, a graphic of kind of a tipping balance. Yet, children are also powerful agents of change. We know that kids can and do have an opportunity when empowered to make a difference, that their voice really does matter. And they can also be part of protecting themselves, as well as really changing the trajectory of the movement, the anti-trafficking movement, and being partners with adults in this process of both preventing and addressing and ending human trafficking and modern day slavery. So yes, there are many things that are stacked against children that keep them vulnerable. But when we think about tools and approaches like peer-to-peer models, when we think about the agency, the power that young people have, especially when they are able to work together, that collective power that they have, when they're supported and mentored by adults, when resources and support are around them, they really are a powerful force to end this human trafficking problem. So what I want to do is focus on some of those positive tools, those opportunities that we have, especially as adults, to engage them and empower them in this work. Because I see youth empowerment but I define it as both a process and a goal. So it's a process and a goal of both supporting young people to recognize their own agency, but also the experience, the process of experiencing their ability to affect change in their own lives and communities. Because we know, the teen years, the young adult years, this is when young people are making really big decisions about their lives, right? Who they're going to marry, what kind of lifestyle they're going to live, what school they might go to, the career choices path that they will choose. So many important things. It's also what kind of life they want to live. What are they going to do with the power that they have? They use it to make a difference in the world? So we want to give them a positive experience of using their power, exercising agency, and seeing that their voice really does matter, that they collectively can work together to help others, that they can choose to use their time, their education, their career, their resources, their choices to make a difference in the lives of others. So youth empowerment is really about adults and especially elders sharing the wisdom, the experience, even the power that they have with young people, to give them those experiences and opportunities. And then when we do that, both benefit. Young people, children, and youth and adults also benefit from that process and that partnership. It's about really youth taking leadership and adults supporting them in that process and kind of easing back as they take the lead. So I think it's really important as it definitely strengthens community ties. It builds democracies and citizenship. It creates engaged citizens who actually will make the world better. So with Live to Free, one of the ways that we work and Live to Free is the Vanguard University's anti-human trafficking club that we have on campus. It's a student-led, youth-focused club to raise awareness and do prevention of human trafficking. And we work both on Vanguard University's campus, but also in the larger community, and especially going out to high schools and youth, even junior highs, to teach young people about the issue of human trafficking and what they can do to keep themselves safe and their peers. And the way that we do that is we do what we call a peer-to-peer model. So it's a tool that recognizes this sociological principle that we are influenced by the behaviors of people we know and we like, those people who we associate as like us, right? And you think about, this principle is true, because if your friend recommends a product or a restaurant and says, you really ought to try it, it's fabulous, you should know about it, you're much more likely to go try that thing or go to that restaurant than if you just saw an advertisement for it, right? That peer-to-peer approach of someone you like and trust and see as like someone like you who has similar interests is going to be more influential in then affecting your behavior. So we see there's a lot of research in the HIV/AIDS and sexual health behaviors that shows that when peers educate other peers, they actually have greater influence, right? So in that research, we find that they reinforce social norms, they reinforce healthy behaviors and become a source of education that's much more powerful in that peer-to-peer relationship than if I, as an adult, were to tell a teenager what they should and shouldn't do, right? So that's that trust that's built, and it builds more likely that the behaviors will change. So at Vanguard University, we employ that peer-to-peer model. We send our college students who are trained and equipped out to high schoolers who are much more likely to listen to these cool older students, these 19, 20-year-olds, than they are if, you know, the 40-something-year-old mama comes in and tries to teach them what they should know. So that's the approach we use. And that peer-to-peer model, I've seen it not only just work in kind of the Southern California context of the United States, but even when I worked at World Vision, we had lots of child rights groups and youth empowerment groups and child participation groups around the globe, really in different contexts, different challenges. But one example I love to share is we had a group in Ghana, and it was a child rights group. And one of the issues that they were discussing and learning about was child marriage, because it was an issue that affected the community, and especially the girls in that community. And so the children in this child rights club learned about really their rights to education, to not be married before the age of 18, to have autonomy and choices in those things. And when it came to, the gossip was going around that one girl was going to be given in marriage, a child, to an adult, in the village. The child participation group got together, decided together they would use their power to go and talk to the parents of the child that was going to be given away in marriage early. And they were able to convince the parents to change their mind, to change the behavior. And that to me is youth empowerment. Kids had the information they needed. They had the collective power together to then partner with adults to make a better choice for that child. And the child was able to continue their education. So what we really are looking at is this continual process of engaging young people from really earliest stages. I mean, child participation is really about engaging very, very young children in issues that affect them, considering their voice, listening to them, and engaging them in the process of together partnering and deciding what is best for the best interest of the child. And as children grow and as youth gain more capacity and skills to be able to discern that and to make those choices, it's our job as adults to kind of step back, let them have opportunities to exercise that leadership and that power. And so that they're moving towards what our final goal is, really engaged and empowered citizens that exercise their voice, that know their place in the community and have that power and understanding and experience to know how to change it for the better, how to address social ills and problems like human trafficking and sexual exploitation. So I have, I know Ian, you can't see this. I've got 4 things listed here of why we should partner with youth and children in the fight against human trafficking. And I'm going to get into all 4 of them. But the first is because, of course, it affects them. We talked about how young people are vulnerable and they have the right to be involved in issues that affect them. The second is it improves the quality and the effectiveness of our interventions. If we're going to try to change things for young people, we have to engage them in it. It's just good marketing, right? We don't want to just protect children from these problems. We want to engage them in how they can solve the problems. The next is it builds the life skills and the empowerment of young people. As they're engaging in this work, they develop all kinds of life skills which are useful for them in their career and their choices that they make going further. And then the 4th reason is it harnesses the power of youth for a sustainable abolitionist movement, the transferring of knowledge and information to keep this movement growing. So I'm going to go into a few more details about what that looks like. So for the first is that, when we engage young people, we are doing this because they have the right to be involved in the issues that affect them. We know that human trafficking, commercial sexual exploitation, online exploitation of teens is rampant in our communities. It does affect them. And we also learn a lot when we ask people about how they're experiencing it and what we can do about it. So children oftentimes in some communities can be seen as kind of passive agents. Like things happen to them sometimes rather than seeing them as actors in these issues, but they really do have the right to be included, and they amazingly have incredible insight and information to share when they are. And I've seen this in so many ways. When I worked at World Vision, we would ask students, young people, to tell us about their experiences or what they saw in their community happening around some commercial sexual exploitation of children. I facilitated some focus group discussions with some kids in Thailand. And just by talking to them, they drew pictures of what they saw. And some of the pictures I'm going to turn it so you can see just a little bit. Some of the pictures they saw depicted actually children being sold by their own family members to traveling pedophiles, tourists that would come to abuse children in Thailand, thinking they could get away with it. So when we understood that the community saw these things happening, it gave us more insight to help equip and empower and talk with children about how to stay safe and how to talk to parents about these issues as well. Children gave us that insight, and they knew it was happening in their community, and they actually wanted to be a part of the solution, to find solutions so that they and their peers would be safe. And the same is true when Live to Free goes out to high schools. We go and we ask communities of high schoolers and even junior hires, we ask them about their experiences by traffickers, really. But do people ask them to send nudes on their phones? Do they get direct messages asking for contact from people that they do not know? And every single hand goes up, because our high schoolers are being, Michaela's shaking her head, yes. Our high schoolers, our junior hires are being pressured to really enter into what turns into commercially sexually exploitive relationships. And if we as parents want to put our heads in the sand, educators don't want to, sometimes we don't know what's actually going on with young people until we engage them and we ask them, and then we ask their ideas of how we can solve these problems and partner together with them. So it affects them, but then we are so much more effective if we partner with young people to find solutions together. So many partnerships are improved when we really engage as equal partners in that process to find solutions together. It's just kind of basic, simple market research, right? You don't design a program to fix a problem until you ask the people who are affected by that problem. They're going to offer you both insight about what's happening, but also tell you if your plan is just not going to fly, right? They'll give you input about what really works. And I see that, when we engage our college students and ask them, well, how would you talk to teenagers about this? How do we keep them safe on social media? Because just telling them not to use social media doesn't work. But what is a smart person's guide, a smart young person's guide to being online, being engaged, but staying safe? And they're gonna have more insight that someone who didn't grow up in that world wouldn't have. So one example I want to share with those of us online as well as here in this room is from Live to Free. We are Vanguard University's anti-trafficking club. 6 years ago, we started a fair trade fashion show. So young people were really passionate about the fact that trafficking is very rampant in the fashion industry. Fashion industry, making of clothing is one of the places where we see a lot of slave labor, exploitation, and abuse of the workers. So we wanted to draw attention to that issue, but actually focus on the positive things that we could do. How do we make different choices as consumers? How do we ensure that we can not only recycle and reuse clothing to give more value to the worker, but we talked about fair trade, which is the kind of stamp of approval that no slave labor has been used in the making of a product. We see fair trade coffee and tea, but there's actually growing market for fair trade clothing as well. So we started, our students came up with the idea, planned it, executed all on their own, a fair trade fashion show to both draw attention and awareness to this issue, but just have fun with it and celebrate the ways that young people can make choices that are really about living out their ethics, showing their values, and focusing on what they can do positively to change the exploitation and labor trafficking that happens around the globe. So if I can get my screen to work, I'm going to try to play a 1.5-minute video that captures what we did through this fair trade fashion show. And remember, this was all designed, planned, and executed by college students, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. So that is just one example of the creativity and I think improved quality of interventions when young people really are allowed to just have creative design and plan for what works for them to create opportunities to learn and to grow. And this last year, we not only were covered by local news on television, so it expanded our reach, just reaching a broader audience, but we also got to partner with some high schoolers who design upscale fashion, taking thrift store clothing and redoing it and making it more fashionable and unique. And it was such a great opportunity for our college students to lead as they then engage high schoolers to be involved in this. And we've inspired other groups, young people's groups, to start fashion shows themselves. The kids love volunteering and being the models and putting it all together. It's been an incredible experience and something I'm really proud of our students. Another example I want to share that I'm really proud of with our students is we also had a program where we brought college students to a high school in our community. It was in Santa Ana, which is a community of a lot of experiences of poverty and a lot of experience of great gang involvement. And so we chose a high school where we knew that that was a vulnerability of a lot of the students, but also just amazing, resilient students. And we had an opportunity to speak with them, to learn with them about human trafficking. We did a semester-long program. And at the end of the semester, the students had a chance to share what they had learned with their own community. Two of the girls I got to work with chose to create a film. They wrote a short film and it ended up being about 5 minutes where what happened was they knew that human trafficking was happening in their own community. They knew what it looked like. It typically looked like young girls in high school like them who would meet a boyfriend who pretended to be in love. And then after kind of wooing her into a romantic relationship, would turn and pimp her out, traffic her, and sell her for sex. So they knew that was happening. They knew how to talk to their peers about it. They knew how teenagers talk to one another, that authentic conversation. And so they wrote a script with that kind of very authentic, both what it looks like in their own community, how teenagers talk to one another to keep each other safe. And the film, which is called The Untold Truth, written by 15-year-old girls, acted by teenagers, high schoolers, and produced by them, is really one of the best tools I've seen in my 20 years of doing this anti-trafficking work, because it is so authentic and because it's made for youth by youth to reach them at where they're at in a way that communicates very strongly. So I can't show it right now because one time and the Wi-Fi is preventing me from showing certain content, but there is a QR code that I've showed on the screen here for those of us who are at home. You can even go to YouTube and find The Untold Truth. This short film is written by high schoolers and it's a powerful tool for communicating with youth, and I'll make sure you get a copy of it. So that's another great example of youth leading the way. I've got a few more minutes. I want to also share about some of the reasons to do this partnership with young people is it absolutely builds their life skills in the process. We know that young people are developing, so they're changing and growing so much, but when they're involved in these anti-trafficking projects and programs, they develop things like self-confidence, self-discovery, identity. They're involved in advocacy, democracy making, decision-making process, planning an event, executing an event, pulling it off, public speaking skills, budgeting, professional writing. All of these are life skills that they can transfer to careers as they choose and even build their resume and their life experiences. And these are achieved when they're engaged with adults in partnerships or leading even the way in youth-led activities to fight human trafficking. And so on the screen that I'm sharing with those of us who are online, I have an example of that same high school group that we worked with from Santa Ana. And this was the congressman from there, Lou Carrera. He's an amazing representative, and he came to reward them for that work that they had done in their community, which again was an amazing, incredible life experience for them to have that recognition and celebration for the work that they had done. Finally, I think one of the main reasons to partner with youth in this anti-trafficking work is we're harnessing the passion that they bring, right? Young people have so much passion and energy. They have this strong sense of justice when they learn about the existence of modern day slavery. So many want to become involved. So we want to harness that to make a difference in the world. They can be absolutely effective and influential partners when they are able to partner with adults in that process. so I've got images of students, marching and demonstrating. The A21 is a nonprofit group that we've partnered with because they're very much youth-led in many ways. We've had opportunities for our students in so many ways to get networked and engaged with other groups. But one of the most powerful things is I've also got an image here of the last 5 generations of Live to Free leaders that I've had an opportunity to lead, to mentor, and as they've grown in their skills and leading their peers. And I think about how there's an opportunity to pass on the wisdom and the experiences that adults have. As elders, as people who've been doing this work for a while, we have this opportunity to not just hold on to that information, but channel that to pass on our wisdom to young people. So that partnership creates sustainability, so that our wisdom can be passed on to the next generation, and then they pass it on to the next generation of youth. And it's a great opportunity for us as adults to learn to mentor and to create opportunities for them to then take the lead with that they grow as they grow. So how can we as adults, those of us who work with young people, support them? Some of the ways that we want to be focusing in on this is, first, obviously, like I said, we do want to share our advice and our wisdom, but also give it freely, and also know that they can choose to pick it up or not, right? We offer it as freely as we can, but we also have to make space for them to be their own leaders and make their own choices. We can teach and we can mentor them, which builds their life skills. One thing we can do is definitely provide resources, whether it's meeting spaces for young people to meet. Adults usually have the resources of buildings and access and office space, but churches and youth spaces, we can provide that for them. Financial resources they might need, even just making sure they have the technology they need to do the work that they want to do. We can provide those resources. We can also provide opportunities for networking, introducing them to other groups that are doing nonprofit work or fighting human trafficking, building those connections, which not only builds their resume and their opportunities for career choices and mentoring opportunities, but really allows them, again, to partner, to have more opportunities to be really collaborative and powerful in their work. And finally, we want to absolutely be encouraging of their work. That's always this sort of give and take of learning how to pass on the wisdom, the advice that we have as adults and our experiences, but also recognizing that it is their work and it's their choice. And sometimes they need the experience to figure things out, and we have to trust in that process that they'll find their way. And of course, there can be challenges. I've got a screen here, a slide, when we talk about some of the challenges. Sometimes adults aren't ready to share power. Sometimes they're used to doing things the way they do it. And it can be challenging to engage young people or make space for them, but it's always worth it. And I think one of the challenges that we've faced, especially when we go up to high schools, is that parents sometimes may be hesitant to talk about these issues. They are tough, and especially if we're talking about sexual exploitation, really heavy topics. But I have found young people are curious, they want to know about these issues. They oftentimes already know a lot more than we think they do, and we want to empower them with accurate information that is also hopeful about the changes, the way they can stay safe and protect their peers, rather than leaving it up to them to figure it out on their own. And then finally, we just want to be cautious of safety and ethics, always being vigilant that, unfortunately, sometimes people who work with organizations that work with youth can actually attract people who would take advantage of that. So we must have really strong child protection policies that we are paying attention to, enacting, and always being vigilant to do our best to protect our youth no matter what the situation. I've got a lot more advice, but I'm going to skip to the end and basically share. I just want to encourage all of you that investing in youth and children in this meaningful partnerships does take time. It is about investing in long-term relationships. We don't always see the fruit of our work right away, but we can trust that it will bear fruit, that it will make a difference. And so I think our job as adults is to really put our trust and our faith in these young people. They are amazing partners, and it's the only way to be effective in preventing and addressing human trafficking going forward. So I hope that's helpful. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to email me. I put my email on the screen for those of you watching online. And you can also follow Live to Free, the group of students at Vanguard that I coach and mentor, on Facebook and Instagram. That's where they share a lot of their information, as well as other ideas about what they're doing to learn from their examples and their work that they're up to. So thank you. I will, if there's any questions, you all can put it in the chat, but we are going to wrap up and go to the next session at this point. I'll stay on for just a minute. If anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I do. I'm hoping, I don't know, maybe do you have a second would it be better to talk after?
Yeah, let me, I think what I'll do is wrap up the recording
Yeah.
now, and then we'll talk, okay?